A very good evening to you and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Are. Here are our top stories. Now, almost 300 lorries taking aid to eastern Ukraine are being held near the Voronezh. That's about 300 kilometers from the border crossing between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine has voiced fears that Russia could be using the convoy as pretext for military action in Ukraine. There have been fears that Russia could use the convoy as a pretext, as was said earlier on, and the Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk has described the Russian move as boundless cynicism. Now, the UN released figures today showing that at least 2,086 people have died since mid-April when Ukraine sent troops against pro-Russia rebels in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Now, a train has derailed after a landslide near the Swiss ski resort of St. Moritz in what police describe as a serious incident. One carriage plunged into a ravine and another was hanging from the rails. The extent of casualties is still sketchy, but the injured have been taken to hospital by helicopter and ambulance. The landslide occurred after heavy rain in eastern Switzerland overnight, and there were reportedly 200 people on the train when the accident occurred. The accident is quite surprising as the Swiss rail system is widely seen as among the safest in the world. But today's accident comes 2 days after 3 people died when their minibus was hit by a train in central Switzerland. Now, unfortunately, there's been yet another recording of the loss of life as regards the crisis in Gaza when 6 people were killed in the Gaza Strip this morning. The incident occurred when an Israeli missile exploded amid attempts to dismantle it. The dead included 2 journalists and a number of bomb disposal officers and occurred in the town of Beit Lahia in the north of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, indirect talks aimed at finding a long-term solution to the Gaza conflict having been taking place in Cairo involving negotiators from the 2 sides. Now, the French President Francois Hollande has announced that in just a couple of hours, France will supply arms to Iraq's Kurds, and France has received the go-ahead from the authorities in Baghdad concerning that decision. Kurdish forces are fighting militants from the Islamic State, that's the IS group formerly known as ISIS, and thousands of members of the Yazidi sect have fled the IS advance. Meanwhile, the UK Prime Minister David Cameron says an international plan is being drawn up to rescue the stranded Yazidis.
Britain made a 3rd round of emergency aid airdrops from the skies above northern Iraq today for the thousands driven from their homes by fighting. Consignments were dropped from 2 Royal Air Force C-130 Hercules cargo planes containing more clean water, purification kits and shelters. Footage from the UK Department for International Development DFID shows the latest nighttime operation to deliver the supplies to thousands of people trapped on Mount Sinjar, including members of the Yazidi religious minority who have been threatened with extermination by Islamic State fighters. The United Nations said 20 to 30,000 Yazidis may yet be sheltering on the arid mountaintop. Thousands more have escaped, helped by Kurdish fighters who are battling the Islamic State militant on several fronts across Iraqi Kurdistan. There have now been a total of 5 successful UK airdrops in northern Iraq since Saturday, August 9, alongside drops by the United States. The US launched airstrikes against Islamic State's target in Iraq on Friday, August 8, And on Saturday, U.S. President Barack Obama said Washington would continue to provide military assistance and advice to Baghdad and Kurdish forces fighting the militants. The Islamic State, formerly known as ISIS, posed the biggest threat to Iraq since Saddam Hussein was toppled by a U.S.-led invasion in 2003. The Sunni militants, who have beheaded and crucified captives in their drive to eradicate those they consider to be unbelievers, first arrived in northern Iraq in June from Syria, where they have captured wide tracts of territory in that country's civil war. Almost unopposed by U.S.-trained Iraqi government forces who fled by the thousands, the insurgents swept through the region and have threatened to march on Baghdad with Iraqi military tanks, armored personnel carriers, and machine guns they seized.
Well, after the break on The World Today, we'll bring you an update on the Ebola virus. Please stay with us. Back to The World Today on Channels Television. Now it's time to shift our attention to the African scene, and of course we begin right here in Nigeria. Delegates to the National Conference are now split between North and South over the draft Constitution 2014 document, which was submitted by the conference secretariat. Some of the delegates who spoke with Channels Television after the short plenary session today explained that they see nothing wrong in the document as presented. For the Northern delegates, this position is unacceptable as the conference lacks the legal authority to draft a new constitution.
I would just wonder how else we could effect the changes that we have without it being written into laws. I believe that what the Secretary has done is to collate all the amendments that we've made and into a book form so that it's easy before the President and his government to effect for the betterment of our country.
That's a freedom you enjoy in democracy. Opinions differ. They are like noses. Every man has a nose. They all look different. The truth of the matter is the Secretariat did a fantastic work. All the amendments were accepted on the floor. Resolutions were made. And we all, as delegates a year, the year had it. And the amendments were now incorporated to amend the 1999 Constitution to give a proposed constitution for 2014. I do not see anything wrong in what this conference have done. As a matter of fact, the conference